The day began like any other. People woke up to their alarms, made their coffee, got ready for work or school, and went about their routines. No one expected that the world they knew would change in the span of a few hours. High above, satellites in orbit picked up something unusual. At first, the data seemed like a glitch, a harmless interference in the normal chatter of space signals. But the signals persisted. They were organized, deliberate, almost as if someone or something was trying to speak. Scientists around the world stared at their screens, exchanging confused messages and hurried emails. They had never seen anything like it before. By midday, news agencies began broadcasting the first images. People crowded around televisions, tablets, and phones. What they saw made their hearts stop. In the sky, enormous shapes appeared, massive and unlike anything humanity had ever built. They moved with precision, almost elegantly, slicing through the atmosphere. Even from hundreds of miles away, the sheer size of these objects was terrifying. Some were longer than entire cities. Some glowed with strange colors, pulsing with energy that made the air itself seem to hum. Governments immediately called emergency meetings. The United Nations convened a special session, while the military powers of the world scrambled to understand what was happening. Panic rippled through the streets of major cities. People tried to make sense of the news, some clinging to hope that these visitors were friendly, some fearing the worst. Rumors spread faster than the truth. Social media became a chaotic battlefield of speculation, videos, and messages from terrified people witnessing the approaching fleet. The first message came late in the afternoon, sent in a language that defied translation at first. It was a simple phrase projected across every communication channel simultaneously. Surrender your world. Resistance means extinction. That was it. No introduction, no explanation, no opportunity for negotiation. Just a warning, cold and absolute. The words echoed across the world, leaving humanity in stunned silence. At first, disbelief was the most common reaction. Many refused to accept that intelligent beings from another star system had arrived. Not as explorers, not as diplomats, but as conquerors. Governments tried to respond diplomatically, sending messages back, hoping that a show of reason or goodwill might delay any violent action. But deep down, everyone knew that the messages were meaningless. The aliens had already made their intentions clear. People everywhere felt a mixture of fear, confusion, and awe. Scientists were fascinated by the technology they glimpsed from afar. Military experts studied the movement patterns of the ships, searching for weaknesses. Ordinary citizens stared at the sky, unable to tear their eyes away from the enormous silhouettes hovering silently above. News anchors spoke in hushed, tense tones, and reporters risked their lives to get a closer look. In homes, workplaces, and schools, people whispered to one another, wondering what it all meant, imagining what might happen next. The first act of violence came as a warning, not by mistake. A city on the coast was obliterated within seconds. One moment it stood as a place full of life, the next it was gone. Streets, buildings, and people vanished as though they had never existed. Television screens showed the horror in real time, though the images were barely recognizable. Emergency services tried to respond but were powerless against a force that seemed beyond comprehension. The impact sent shockwaves around the world, and fear shifted from curiosity to survival. Despite the terror, humanity's instinct to survive emerged almost immediately. Military forces began mobilizing on an unprecedented scale, but the difference in technology was staggering. Human weapons that had once seemed advanced were ineffective against ships that hovered effortlessly in the sky, protected by shields and energy fields that human minds could barely imagine. Pilots flew missions knowing the odds were almost zero, yet they went anyway, hoping to delay the inevitable, buying precious time for scientists and engineers to work on something, anything, that could turn the tide. In secret labs deep underground, teams of scientists, engineers, and inventors worked frantically. They studied every piece of alien technology they could observe from a distance, every pulse of energy, every movement pattern. They debated strategies, argued over possibilities, and tried approaches that sometimes failed spectacularly. Still, they persisted. Some worked around the clock without sleep, eating only what they could grab in moments between experiments. Their determination became a quiet but unstoppable force, as if the sheer will to survive could compensate for the technological gap. Meanwhile, people on the streets tried to cling to normalcy, even when the sky itself had become a reminder of the threat. Children asked questions their parents struggled to answer. Families huddled together, trying to comfort one another even as anxiety grew. Ordinary acts, preparing meals, checking on neighbors, sharing information, took on new significance. Humanity's greatest strength was beginning to show, the ability to adapt, to organize, and to resist even when facing unimaginable odds. Communication networks became critical. People who had never met began coordinating through improvised channels. Scientists in one country shared data with engineers in another, despite the chaos. News networks created emergency broadcasts that offered instructions and updates. Ordinary citizens helped one another, forming makeshift shelters, sharing supplies, and volunteering to assist wherever needed. Even in the face of fear, cooperation became a survival strategy. The first night of the invasion was unlike any the world had known. The sky glowed unnaturally with the reflections of alien energy. Cities went dark, either destroyed or evacuated as humanity tried to survive and assess the damage. Yet even in the darkness, humans displayed resilience. Some risked everything to document the events, capturing images and video that would later become historical records. Some formed small resistance groups, organizing defenses with whatever equipment they could find. The instinct to fight, to endure, and to preserve the world they had known was stronger than despair. By dawn, it was clear that nothing would ever be the same. The signals continued to arrive from the aliens, a constant reminder that surrender was demanded but not guaranteed. Yet humanity, shaken but not broken, began to respond. Leaders convened, scientists developed plans, and people everywhere began to adapt to a reality that once would have seemed like science fiction. There was fear, but there was also determination. This first day marked the beginning of a new chapter in human history. The aliens had declared war and their power was overwhelming. But the human response, though still in its infancy, carried a quiet but profound hope. It was the realization that even in the face of extinction, humanity had the capacity to think, to innovate, and to fight back. The events of that day would later be remembered not only for the fear and destruction, but for the first sparks of resistance and resilience, the first signs that humans, as fragile as they were, refused to be mere victims. In every corner of the world, people stared at the sky, some in terror, some in awe, and some with determination burning quietly in their hearts. It was a day that no one would forget, a day when humanity first understood that the universe was far larger and far more dangerous than they had imagined. And it was a day when humans, united by fear and courage alike, began to prepare for a fight unlike any they had ever faced before. Even as the sun rose on the shattered world, one thing was clear: humanity had been warned, and yet they were already beginning to rise, not as individuals, not as nations alone, but as a species determined to survive, adapt, and eventually respond. The first day was only the beginning, but it had set the stage for everything that would follow. The first strike came without warning. Before humanity could even fully process the arrival of the alien fleet, the sky above a major coastal city erupted in brilliant, unnatural light. People watched in horror as massive energy beams cut through the air, striking buildings, bridges, and streets. In an instant, the city that had been full of life, full of families and businesses, was reduced to ash and smoke. The ground trembled as though the planet itself had groaned in protest. Those who survived the initial blast ran blindly, some screaming, some in stunned silence, trying to find shelter from a power they could neither see nor comprehend. Television footage captured the chaos. From one angle, a parent lifted a child into their arms, fleeing down a cracked street. From another, office workers scrambled out of glass towers as windows shattered violently around them. Emergency sirens wailed through the smoke, but the sounds were faint against the alien roar that seemed to shake the air itself. People watching from other cities could hardly bear to look. They knew that if the aliens could destroy one city so easily, no place on Earth was safe. Despite the shock and despair, humanity's instinct to survive kicked in immediately. Soldiers, firefighters, and volunteers rushed toward danger, not away from it. They worked to pull survivors from rubble, guided by training, instinct, and sheer determination. In places far from the first attack, people began organizing. Communities locked down, set up shelters, and prepared to protect themselves as best they could. Ordinary life had vanished, replaced by a grim reality where survival was the only priority. The military response began. though it was clear almost immediately that the odds were stacked against humanity. Fighter jets launched into the sky, missiles streaked toward the alien ships, and armies mobilized along coastlines and borders. But the weapons that had once seemed so advanced against other humans were almost useless against these invaders. Bullets bounced harmlessly off the alien hulls. Missiles detonated in flashes of light, only to be absorbed by shields that humans could not penetrate. Even the most experienced pilots found themselves powerless, their courage tested beyond any battlefield they had ever known. Scientists scrambled to understand the alien technology. Teams in laboratories worked around the clock, analyzing every piece of data they could gather. Every energy pulse, every maneuver, every reaction of the alien ships was studied and debated. The scientists realized that the aliens were not just attacking, they were testing humanity. Each strike, each demonstration of power was a message. Resistance was pointless. But while the aliens may have underestimated humanity's creativity, the humans did not give up. In the streets, people tried to adapt in real time. Families moved into basements and underground stations. Makeshift barricades were built from furniture and debris. Communities that had never known each other before became teams of survivalists, sharing supplies and information, teaching one another how to stay safe. Children were hidden, pets were protected, and even the smallest acts of human compassion became acts of defiance. Despite the overwhelming fear, humans continued to act, to help, and to endure. Across the globe, governments faced impossible choices. Should they attempt to fight knowing the technology gap was immense? Or should they negotiate, knowing that the invaders had already made it clear that surrender was demanded, not suggested? In tense, secretive meetings, leaders discussed strategies that often seemed desperate. Evacuation plans were drafted, cities were designated as potential sacrifice zones, and attempts were made to gather resources for a long, uncertain struggle. Every decision carried consequences. Every delay could mean the loss of thousands of lives. Meanwhile, in secret laboratories and underground bunkers, some of the brightest minds on Earth worked tirelessly. They were engineers, scientists, mathematicians, and ordinary citizens with extraordinary skills, brought together by a single purpose: to find a way to fight back. They experimented with energy systems, magnetic fields, and even unconventional physics theories. Sometimes their work failed spectacularly, producing explosions or equipment failures, but they learned from each mistake. The pressure was immense. The world's survival depended on their ability to innovate under impossible conditions. Ordinary people also contributed in unexpected ways. Truck drivers transported supplies through hazardous zones. Farmers opened their fields to store food and water. Teachers and doctors shared knowledge and skills to help communities survive. Humanity's strength was not only in technology or military might, it was in cooperation, resilience, and creativity. In the face of an enemy that seemed unstoppable, humans began to show that their ingenuity and willpower could not be measured by size or firepower alone. As the alien attacks continued, the psychological toll became evident. Survivors experienced fear, despair, and shock. Mental health became as critical as physical survival. Communities created safe spaces where people could talk, rest, and support one another. Stories of courage and sacrifice spread, giving hope that humanity could endure even the unimaginable. The acts of everyday heroes became the lifeblood of morale, inspiring others to continue despite overwhelming odds. In the skies, fighter pilots continued their desperate missions. Many never returned, but their efforts were not in vain. They delayed the aliens just enough to allow evacuation efforts, resource transport, and the continuation of scientific research. Pilots who survived carried with them stories of bravery, of witnessing alien technology up close, of facing death and returning to fight another day. These stories, shared in whispers and broadcasts, reminded humanity that resistance was possible, even if victory seemed distant. One of the most remarkable aspects of humanity's response was the speed at which global cooperation emerged. Countries that had been rivals for centuries suddenly shared intelligence, technology, and resources. Military strategies were coordinated across borders. Scientists from different continents worked together as if they had known each other for years. The urgency of survival created bonds that politics could never achieve. Humanity was learning to act as one species rather than divided nations in the face of an external threat. Communication was both a tool and a weapon. Emergency broadcasts warned of potential strike zones, provided safety instructions, and offered reassurances. Social media, though chaotic, became a hub for sharing critical information. People mapped alien movements, shared survival tips, and reported sightings in real time. Every message counted, and every piece of information could save lives. Humans were turning fear into strategy and confusion into action. The first days of the attack revealed both the fragility and resilience of human civilization. Cities were lost, infrastructure was damaged, and countless lives were destroyed. Yet in the midst of destruction, there was determination. People adapted to scarcity. Engineers improvised replacements for lost technology, and scientists refined their understanding of the alien threat. Even as despair loomed, humanity continued to respond, to survive, and to resist. By the end of that first period of attacks, it was clear that the aliens were not just a physical threat. They were testing the spirit of humanity. Each strike was a reminder of their power, but each human response was a testament to resilience. People who had once gone about ordinary lives were now part of something much larger, a fight for the survival of the species. Ordinary actions, courage, and ingenuity became as important as any weapon. Even as night fell, the world did not rest. Cities that were still standing became fortresses of activity. Scientists continued to analyze data. Soldiers prepared for patrols and defensive actions. Civilians kept watch, shared resources, and adapted to the new reality. Humanity had been forced into a war it did not ask for, against an enemy it could barely understand. But humans, as they always had, were finding ways to endure. It was in these moments of crisis that humanity's true nature shone. People acted not for glory or recognition, but because they understood that survival depended on collective effort. Neighbors helped neighbors, strangers protected each other, and communities learned to function like coordinated units of resilience. Small acts, sharing food, guiding the lost, comforting the frightened, became monumental. They were the quiet defiance that kept hope alive. By the close of this first wave of attacks, the lesson was clear. Humanity had been severely tested, but it had not been broken. The aliens had shown their power and declared their intent to dominate. Cities had fallen and lives had been lost. Yet in the face of destruction, humanity had responded with courage, creativity, and solidarity. The stage was set for what would come next, a struggle that would test not just strength, but intelligence, determination, and the very essence of survival. People looked up at the sky each night, knowing that the enemy was still out there. Fear lingered, but so did resolve. The first strike had been a warning, but humanity had already begun its response. It was a response not of surrender, but of preparation, defiance, and hope. The story of the next days, weeks, and months would be one of ingenuity, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of a species that refused to give up. While the world above struggled against alien attacks deep underground, a different battle was taking place. In hidden laboratories, tunnels, and bunkers far from the sight of the invaders, teams of scientists and engineers worked tirelessly. They were no longer just reacting, they were planning. They were working on something that could change the course of the war. Something that no missile, no fighter jet, no conventional weapon could achieve. It was risky, almost impossible, but it was the only chance humanity had. The project, known simply among the team as Project Dawnfire, was shrouded in secrecy. Only a few trusted leaders knew the full extent of what they were attempting. Supplies, equipment, and technology were gathered from every corner of the world. Universities, private companies, and even amateur inventors contributed designs and ideas. What was being built could not be described in ordinary terms. It was not just a weapon, it was a fusion of science, ingenuity, and the unyielding will to survive. At the center of this operation was a quiet but determined leader, a woman who rarely raised her voice, yet whose authority was absolute. She guided the team with calm precision, making decisions that could mean life or death. She understood the stakes better than anyone. The project was humanity's chance to strike back, but failure would be catastrophic. Despite the pressure, she instilled a sense of purpose. The scientists and engineers were not just building a machine, they were building hope. Every day was a race against time. While the team experimented with complex energy systems and theoretical physics, the alien attacks continued. Cities were destroyed, populations displaced, and entire regions lost to chaos. The team often worked in silence, listening to distant reports of devastation above ground. knowing that every failure in their calculations could cost countless lives. Yet rather than fear, this drove them. Each mistake was analyzed, each result refined, and slowly the impossible began to take shape. The core idea of Project Dawnfire was audacious. The team planned to use the planet itself as part of the weapon. By manipulating the Earth's natural magnetic fields and resonance frequencies, they believed they could overload the alien energy systems. The concept was so complex, so unprecedented, that some scientists initially dismissed it as fantasy. Yet the leader remained confident. She explained that humanity had no other options, and sometimes survival required brilliance beyond imagination. The process was painstaking. Instruments had to be calibrated with extreme precision. Massive amounts of energy needed to be harnessed, stored, and directed. Underground facilities buzzed with activity day and night. Engineers monitored every wire, every circuit, every node. Scientists ran endless simulations, testing how the system would react under different conditions. Each experiment pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. Failures were common, and some experiments caused minor accidents, reminding everyone of the enormous risk. Outside the underground world, ordinary humans continued to endure the alien attacks. Survivors in cities that had escaped destruction adapted to new ways of living. Communities rationed food, shared medical supplies, and maintained communications. People who had never known hardship worked tirelessly to support one another. While the scientists below focused on the ultimate weapon, those on the surface were performing everyday acts of heroism, rescuing the injured, guiding refugees, and keeping morale alive. Humanity's strength was not in one brilliant idea alone, but in the combined effort of countless people refusing to give up. Back in Project Dawnfire, the team faced technical challenges that seemed insurmountable. Containing and directing energy at such a massive scale was unprecedented. Components had to withstand extreme forces, and the team constantly improvised. They scavenged materials, adapted old machinery, and used creative solutions where modern technology failed. Every obstacle required thinking outside the box, and the team often found themselves inventing entirely new branches of science as they went along. Communication was critical. The scientists worked in shifts, passing knowledge and results between groups in different locations. Ideas from one continent were tested in another, and failures in one place often became breakthroughs in another. Despite the chaos of the outside world, the teams maintained strict organization and discipline. They knew that even the smallest miscalculation could render the entire project useless, or worse, trigger catastrophic consequences. The psychological pressure was intense. Long hours, sleep deprivation, and the constant awareness of the stakes weighed heavily on everyone. But the leader understood the importance of mental strength. She made sure that breaks, conversations, and support systems were available. Even the briefest moments of relief helped maintain focus. Humanity's resilience was not only in technical skill, but in the ability to endure unimaginable stress and continue working toward a shared goal. As the project progressed, it became more than just a weapon. It became a symbol of hope. Scientists who had once doubted the plan began to believe that it might actually succeed. Engineers who had feared failure felt a sense of purpose that transcended personal ambition. Even in the shadow of destruction, humanity's creativity and determination were flourishing. The alien threat above ground was immense, but below ground, humans were proving that intellect and courage could match sheer force. The team faced moments of near despair. Early prototypes failed spectacularly, sometimes causing power surges or minor collapses in the facilities. Yet each setback was studied, learned from, and improved upon. Mistakes were not wasted, they became stepping stones. Slowly, the impossible seemed achievable. The system began to take shape, and for the first time the team dared to imagine that it could work. Outside, reports of alien attacks grew more frequent and intense. Entire regions had been devastated. The aliens seemed unstoppable, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Yet, the people who continued to live, fight, and survive were the foundation upon which Project Dawnfire depended. Every act of defiance, every small victory, every community that survived long enough to contribute supplies, data, or personnel, strengthened humanity's ability to resist. The underground project and the surface struggle were two sides of the same effort, bound by a single goal: survival. By the time months had passed, Project Dawnfire had grown into a massive operation. Multiple underground facilities linked by secure tunnels housed thousands of people working around the clock. The system had been tested in simulations repeatedly, each test bringing humanity closer to understanding how to harness the planet's energy safely. The team knew that the final activation would be the most dangerous step yet. If miscalculated, it could destroy everything, including the Earth itself. Yet the determination to succeed outweighed the fear. The leader of the project often walked among her teams quietly, observing, encouraging, and occasionally giving guidance. She did not promise easy success or a smooth path, but she reminded everyone why they were there. They were working not for fame or recognition, but for every person left alive on the surface. They were the guardians of hope, the architects of humanity's future in the face of annihilation. Their work was invisible to the world above, but it carried the weight of life itself. As the months went on, the team continued refining the system. Redundant safety measures were built in, alternative energy pathways were tested, and simulations of alien attacks were run to ensure the system would respond correctly. Every variable, every potential failure point was studied. The team operated with almost religious precision, aware that success required not only brilliance but discipline, coordination, and relentless attention to detail. Even amidst the tension and danger, moments of human warmth persisted. Scientists shared meals and brief pauses, exchanged stories of their families and lives before the invasion, and celebrated small breakthroughs together. These moments reminded everyone of what they were fighting for: the chance for humanity to continue existing, not as isolated survivors, but as a species capable of facing the impossible. Humanity's brilliance and resilience became more than science. It became a testament to the human spirit. Finally, after months of preparation, the system began to function as intended in controlled tests. Small-scale experiments confirmed that the concept could work. Energy could be contained, directed, and amplified using the Earth's natural properties. The team understood that the final test, the full-scale activation, was still months away and would carry unimaginable risk. Yet for the first time, hope was tangible. Humanity might actually have a weapon capable of challenging the alien fleet. The work of Project Dawnfire was far from complete, but it marked the beginning of a turning point. Humanity had transitioned from passive survival to active preparation. The aliens had unleashed destruction and terror, but humans were now preparing something that could strike back in a way the invaders had never imagined. For the first time, it seemed possible that the balance of power might shift, even against an enemy that seemed invincible. And so, beneath the ruins of a world under siege, humanity quietly fought back, not with firepower alone, but with intelligence, creativity, and determination. Project Dawnfire became a symbol of what humans could achieve when pushed to the edge of extinction. It was dangerous, untested, and audacious, but it was also a promise that the aliens were no longer just testing humanity, they were punishing it. Their attacks became more frequent, more precise, and more devastating. Cities that had survived the first strikes were now under direct assault. The sky was alive with energy blasts, streaks of light that vaporized entire neighborhoods in seconds. People had learned to run, to hide, to survive, but even these measures were proving inadequate. No warning system, no barricade, no evacuation plan could keep pace with the destruction above. Reports came in from every corner of the world. Entire coastlines disappeared under fire. High-rise buildings that had stood for decades crumbled into dust. Bridges, airports, and highways were gone, cutting off access to food, water, and medical supplies. Communication networks were damaged or destroyed, forcing humanity to rely on improvised methods: hand signals, runners, and underground radio channels. The world had become a battlefield where survival was the only certainty. Fear was everywhere, but so was determination. People refused to surrender, even as the aliens made their intentions brutally clear. Families carried what little they could save and moved to basements, tunnels, and underground shelters. Communities improvised hospitals in abandoned buildings, schools, and subway stations. Every act of survival became an act of defiance. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity's instinct to protect one another and to endure persisted. The military struggled to respond effectively. Fighter jets engaged the alien ships, but their weapons were largely ineffective. Missiles detonated harmlessly against alien shields. Infantry units were powerless against energy weapons that could cut through armored vehicles as if they were paper. Yet soldiers continued to fight, buying precious time for civilians to evacuate and for scientists to continue their work. Their courage became a symbol of human resilience, a reminder that even when technology failed, human bravery still mattered. Meanwhile, Project Dawnfire, the secret plan to fight back, was in its most critical phase. Scientists and engineers worked relentlessly, aware that every failure above ground meant more urgency below. The leader of the project coordinated efforts across multiple underground facilities, keeping teams focused and organized. Energy systems were monitored, circuits tested, and simulations ran repeatedly. Each calculation had to be perfect. The project was humanity's last hope, and the pressure was immense. The challenge was not just technical, it was psychological. The team worked long hours with little rest, knowing that the world outside was being destroyed as they worked. They could hear the distant rumble of explosions, the faint glow of fires reaching the surface, and the cries of civilians in broadcasts. Sleep was scarce, food was limited, fear was constant, yet they persisted. Each failure became a lesson, each obstacle a motivation. Their work was not just about science. It was about survival, about hope, about the possibility that humanity could fight back. On the surface, ordinary people became heroes in ways that went unnoticed by the world at large. Volunteers transported food and water through areas under fire. Neighbors protected each other, sharing shelter and supplies. Doctors and nurses treated the injured with whatever limited resources they had, improvising medical care in basements, tunnels, and abandoned buildings. Communities functioned like small armies of resilience, surviving not through technology but through cooperation and courage. The alien attacks escalated to unprecedented levels. Entire continents felt their wrath. Forests burned, rivers boiled, and mountains shook. The aliens' strategy was clear. They aimed to weaken humanity psychologically as much as physically. The destruction was meant to demoralize, to break the will of humans to resist, yet humanity's determination only grew. People adapted, learned, and innovated. Every disaster was met with problem-solving. Every strike countered with endurance. Survival had become a way of life, and resistance a shared mission. In the military, commanders coordinated with scientists to protect critical infrastructure. Convoys carried supplies to underground facilities. Engineers repaired damaged communication lines and power sources. Soldiers escorted scientists through dangerous zones to ensure Project Dawnfire could continue. Coordination between civilians, scientists, and military personnel became crucial. Humanity's survival depended not on any one group, but on the unity of many, each contributing in their own way. Psychologically, the pressure was crushing. The constant threat of annihilation weighed heavily on everyone. Families feared for their loved ones. Workers feared for their lives. Children feared the sky above. People experienced anxiety, despair, and grief. Yet amidst this, small acts of hope persisted. Communities celebrated small victories, saving a child, delivering food to a shelter, maintaining a makeshift school. These moments of humanity became fuel for survival, reminders that life was worth fighting for. Project Dawnfire faced its own crisis points. Energy systems overheated during tests. Some components failed entirely, forcing teams to redesign and rebuild under extreme time pressure. Yet every problem solved brought humanity closer to a weapon capable of striking the aliens. The underground teams developed new techniques to stabilize energy fields, redirect power flows, and synchronize the system with the planet's natural frequencies. Every breakthrough was a silent victory in a war that seemed impossible. The alien fleet above continued to patrol the skies, striking strategic targets with precision. Humans had learned to hide, to evade, and to adapt, but the attacks were relentless. Cities that had resisted for weeks now fell. Coastal populations were forced inland. Governments implemented emergency measures to maintain order, but chaos often broke through. Panic was common, yet alongside it, courage emerged in extraordinary ways. Strangers saved strangers, soldiers saved civilians, and communities organized defense strategies with whatever tools were available. Even in the darkest moments, humanity refused to give up. Ordinary people became problem solvers, finding ways to secure water, purify food, and keep communication networks alive. Engineers adapted civilian vehicles into mobile shelters or transport for critical supplies. Teachers turned basements into classrooms to keep children's minds engaged. People who had once lived ordinary lives became essential to survival. Each action, no matter how small, contributed to humanity's ability to endure. As the attacks intensified, the team working on Project Dawnfire understood that time was running out. Every day the aliens remained in the sky meant more destruction, more lives lost, more pressure to succeed. Yet the underground team remained focused, refusing to be paralyzed by fear. They pushed their knowledge, creativity, and determination to the limit. The system grew closer to readiness with each passing day, a symbol of hope that humanity could fight back against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. The leader of the project kept morale high. She reminded her teams that their work was about more than technology. It was about preserving life, protecting future generations, and proving that humanity could endure even in the face of unimaginable odds. Her calm, determined presence inspired everyone, reminding them that courage was as essential as skill. Even under extreme stress, the team worked as one, a coordinated unit of resilience and brilliance. Above ground, humans continued to resist. Fighter pilots flew missions knowing the odds were almost zero, yet their bravery allowed civilians and scientists to survive. Ground units built barricades, protected convoys, and coordinated evacuations. Every action was a small defiance against the alien force, a statement that humans would not simply surrender. Survival became both a practical goal and a moral imperative. By the end of this period of relentless assault, humanity had reached a breaking point, but it had not broken. Cities were in ruins, millions were lost, and the aliens' power was overwhelming. Yet humanity had adapted, organized, and continued to resist. The underground teams had made incredible progress with Project Dawnfire, turning theoretical ideas into workable systems. The surface population, despite facing near-impossible odds, had learned to endure, adapt, and fight in ways that the aliens had not anticipated. It was a moment of quiet determination in a world filled with chaos. The aliens had tightened their grip, demonstrating their might and spreading fear, but humanity had responded with resilience, courage, and ingenuity. Civilians, soldiers, and scientists alike had all played a role in this response. The groundwork for the ultimate counterstrike was being laid, a plan that depended on every human willing to survive, every mind willing to innovate, and every hand willing to endure. By the close of this period, it was clear that humanity had changed. Fear remained, but it was now accompanied by purpose. Destruction had forced humans to evolve strategies, systems, and resilience at an unprecedented scale. While the aliens had brought terror and devastation, they had also forged a human spirit more determined than ever. The battle had become not just about surviving strikes, but about preparing for the day when humanity would fight back and fight to win. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, people continued to look forward. Communities rebuilt temporary shelters, soldiers planned coordinated defenses, and scientists refined Project Dawnfire. The alien attacks had tested every aspect of human endurance, physically, mentally, and emotionally. But humans had adapted, learned, and persisted. The world was scarred, but humanity had. The day had finally arrived. After months of preparation, countless experiments, and endless nights of work, the team underground knew that Project Dawnfire was ready. Every component had been tested, every calculation double-checked, and every risk assessed. Yet, even with all the preparation, there was no way to be completely sure it would work. The fate of humanity rested on a system unlike anything the world had ever seen, a fusion of science, ingenuity, and human determination. Above ground, the alien fleet continued its patrols. Cities that had survived the previous waves were now fortified, but the destruction around them was devastating. Fires burned in the distance, clouds of smoke filled the skies, and the ground trembled with every energy blast. The aliens were confident, their movements precise and seemingly unstoppable. They had expected humanity to surrender long ago, but the humans below ground and across the world were about to prove them wrong. The leader of Project Dawnfire moved quietly among her team. Her presence was calm yet full of authority. She reminded them that this was not just a weapon. It was a declaration that humanity would not yield. Every person in the facility understood the stakes. Engineers monitored energy flows, scientists adjusted resonance frequencies, and technicians synchronized every part of the system. The tension was palpable. Every eye was fixed on the displays, every hand steady despite exhaustion, and every mind focused on the single goal: survival. The final activation required coordination with teams across multiple underground locations. Data had to flow perfectly between facilities, and energy had to be directed with precise timing. It was a complex dance of science and technology, with the Earth itself as a participant. The team worked in silence, broken only by quiet commands and the hum of machines. Every member of Project Dawnfire knew that failure would not just be a setback. It could mean the end of the human race. When the activation sequence began, the Earth itself seemed to respond. Instruments recorded vibrations deep within the planet, resonating with the frequencies generated by the project. Energy built up in controlled arcs, spreading through underground conduits and amplifying across continents. Above ground, the sky shimmered with strange colors, strange currents of light that no human had ever witnessed before. The first few moments were tense. The team waited for any sign of malfunction. When the system held, a collective breath was taken, and the countdown continued. In orbit, the alien fleet began to notice something unusual. Their energy shields flickered. Their communication systems experienced interference. They scanned the planet below and saw the pulses of energy rising from multiple points across the globe. At first, they thought it was a malfunction, but as the pulses intensified, it became clear that humanity had created something beyond their expectations. The aliens had underestimated the creativity, intelligence, and determination of humans. On the surface, the remaining human forces watched in awe and disbelief. Strange lights moved across the skies, flowing in patterns that seemed alive. The alien ships, once calm and precise, now struggled as their systems were disrupted. Missiles that had once been blocked now began to malfunction. Energy weapons flickered and failed. Small human forces, previously powerless, noticed that the tide of battle had shifted. The impossible was beginning to happen. The system worked by amplifying the Earth's natural magnetic fields and resonance frequencies to interact directly with the alien technology. What the aliens had relied on as invincible shields, precise energy weapons, and unmatched mobility now became vulnerabilities. Their ships shook, energy systems overloaded, and in some cases entire vessels erupted in silent explosions. From human bunkers and shelters, people watched as the alien fleet, so terrifying only hours before, began to falter. The beauty and terror of the moment were intertwined. Humanity had created a weapon that was not just destructive, but elegant in its design. Energy flowed through the planet in a controlled symphony, targeting alien systems with precision, while avoiding catastrophic damage to the Earth itself. Scientists and engineers watched in silent amazement as their calculations, their sleepless nights, and their unrelenting determination produced results beyond imagination. Above the battlefields, alien ships exploded in series, sending debris tumbling through the skies. Their energy pulses, which had once vaporized entire cities, now malfunctioned, ricocheting off their own vessels. Smaller alien crafts were forced to retreat, disoriented and powerless. For the first time since the invasion began, humans felt a surge of hope. They had turned the planet itself into a weapon, and the results were breathtaking. Even as the system reached peak activation, the team knew the danger was not over. Project Dawnfire required constant monitoring. Energy spikes had to be controlled, failures had to be corrected instantly, and every pulse had to be synchronized. The underground facilities buzzed with activity, technicians moving from console to console, checking readings, adjusting outputs, and recalibrating systems. The smallest mistake could undo all of the work, yet the team remained calm and precise, trusting their training and expertise. On the surface, soldiers and civilians watched as the alien attacks faltered. Fighter pilots realized their weapons now had a chance to succeed. Missiles launched from human ships and bases found their targets. Ground units previously overpowered were able to push back against isolated alien forces. The unexpected turn of events changed the morale of every human involved. Fear remained, but determination and courage surged in equal measure. Humanity had created not just a weapon, but a symbol of resistance and hope. The process was painstakingly slow but devastatingly effective. Alien ships continued to malfunction and explode. Smaller fleets tried to regroup, but the effects of Project Dawnfire disrupted their navigation and energy systems. The aliens, who had once seemed invincible, were now struggling to survive. Humans had taken the first major step in turning the tide of war. From shelters, bunkers, and temporary command centers, people watched as the impossible became reality. As the system reached its full effect, the alien fleet began to scatter. Some ships attempted to flee beyond the planet's atmosphere, but energy interference disrupted their propulsion systems. Others malfunctioned entirely, plummeting toward the planet. Humanity's response was precise and controlled. While the alien technology was destroyed, the Earth itself remained intact. The system had worked exactly as intended, a masterpiece of human ingenuity, using the planet's own natural forces as a weapon while minimizing damage to humanity. The team underground allowed themselves a brief moment of celebration. Cheers, tears, and laughter mingled in the control rooms. Every member of Project Dawnfire understood the gravity of what they had achieved. They had not only defended the planet, but they had demonstrated that humanity, even in the face of unimaginable odds, could create solutions that no alien technology could anticipate. The effort, the risk, and the perseverance had paid off. Above ground, people emerged from shelters cautiously, staring at the sky as the remaining alien ships fled. Cities were still damaged and much of the world lay in ruins, but for the first time since the invasion began, hope was visible. Humanity had struck back. The invaders, confident in their superiority, had been shown that human creativity, intelligence, and determination could turn the tide. Humanity had responded with a masterpiece of destruction, and it was not only effective but breathtaking in its precision and control. The aftermath of the activation was overwhelming. News broadcasts, wherever available, shared images of the scattered alien fleet and the destruction of their technology. People across the globe, many still in hiding or traveling to safer areas, felt a surge of pride and hope. Humanity had endured, adapted, and fought back in a way that no one could have predicted. Ordinary people, soldiers, scientists, and engineers alike, had all contributed to this moment. Every act, every sacrifice, every sleepless night had mattered. Even as the immediate threat subsided, the team of Project Dawnfire knew that the battle was not over. The aliens might regroup, adapt, or return with new strategies. Humanity had won a crucial battle, but the war was ongoing. Preparations continued, defenses were strengthened, and lessons were learned from the incredible success of the project. The system itself required ongoing maintenance and monitoring, yet for the first time humanity knew that victory, or at least survival, was possible. The world had witnessed a moment that would be remembered for generations. Humans had turned their home planet into a weapon, not mindlessly but with intelligence, coordination, and care. They had fought not just with force but with creativity and courage. The sky, once a symbol of fear and destruction, had become a testament to human ingenuity. Humanity had responded to an impossible threat with a masterpiece of precision, strategy, and hope. Across the battered cities and underground bunkers, people slowly began to rebuild. Communities strengthened, cooperation increased, and morale surged. Soldiers trained with renewed purpose, engineers continued refining systems, and civilians contributed wherever they could. The sense of unity was palpable. Humanity had been tested like never before, and in response it had proven that survival, resilience, and creativity were its greatest strengths. Even in the quiet moments that followed, people reflected on what had happened. The alien fleet had scattered, their ships crippled or destroyed by the precision of Project Dawnfire. For the first time in months, the skies above Earth were quiet. Yet the silence was not comforting. Cities lay in ruins, smoke and dust hung over once thriving towns, and countless lives had been lost. Streets that had once bustled with activity were now empty, littered with debris and marked by the scars of alien fire. People emerged cautiously from shelters, their faces streaked with soot, eyes wide with disbelief and hearts heavy with grief. Survivors moved slowly, helping one another navigate the devastation. Families who had stayed underground or hidden in basements were reunited with neighbors and friends, sometimes after long and harrowing separations. There were tears, hugs, and quiet sobs of relief. For many, the horror was not yet over. Loved ones were still missing. Homes were gone, and the world they had known no longer existed. Yet alongside grief, there was an undeniable sense of hope. Humanity had endured the unimaginable, and that fact alone inspired courage. Communities began to organize quickly. People realized that survival required action, cooperation, and planning. Makeshift shelters were expanded, food and water were distributed, and medical aid was provided to the injured. Ordinary citizens took leadership roles, coordinating efforts to clear debris, rebuild infrastructure, and restore communication networks. Even in the midst of destruction, people found ways to help each other. The human instinct to cooperate, to protect one another, and to endure had become a powerful force. The soldiers who had survived the battles above ground became symbols of resilience. They patrolled damaged cities, protected civilians from remaining threats, and assisted in reconstruction efforts. Their bravery and sacrifices were remembered and honored by those around them. They were no longer just fighters. They were leaders, teachers, and guides in a world that had been pushed to the edge. Communities relied on their discipline, experience, and courage as much as on their own willpower. The scientists and engineers behind Project Dawnfire emerged from their underground facilities weary but triumphant. They were greeted with gratitude, respect, and awe. Their work had saved humanity, but it had come at a tremendous cost. Long hours, sleepless nights, and the weight of knowing that failure would have meant extinction. The activation of the project had been flawless, but it had required courage, precision, and unity on a scale that few could fully comprehend. These individuals became heroes, not just for their technical skill, but for their perseverance, vision, and dedication to survival. Humanity began to rebuild in earnest. Engineers assessed the damage to critical infrastructure: roads, bridges, power grids, and water systems. Teams worked tirelessly to restore basic services, improvising where necessary. Schools, hospitals, and shelters were re-established, often using temporary structures. Food and water supplies were rationed and distributed carefully, while farmers and communities worked together to restart agriculture. Every effort, no matter how small, was a step toward regaining control of a world that had been violently shaken. Even with the alien threat diminished, people understood that vigilance was necessary. Humanity had survived, but the universe was vast and dangers remained. Communication networks were rebuilt, early warning systems were established, and defensive strategies were revised. Nations and communities began to work together more closely, sharing technology, intelligence, and resources. The lessons learned during the invasion about resilience, innovation, and cooperation would shape humanity's approach to the future. The psychological impact of the war was immense. Survivors struggled with trauma, grief, and fear, and many faced nightmares of destruction and loss. Yet alongside the pain, there was determination. Communities established spaces for healing, counseling, and mutual support. Stories of bravery, sacrifice, and ingenuity were shared widely, inspiring hope and reaffirming humanity's capacity to endure. Every act of kindness, courage, and collaboration became a reminder that even in the darkest times, humans could rise above fear. Children, in particular, represented hope for the future. Schools reopened in improvised spaces, and teachers worked tirelessly to provide not only education, but also a sense of normalcy and safety. Children played in the rubble, laughed in spite of everything, and learned to adapt to a world that had been forever changed. Their resilience reminded adults that life, no matter how fragile, would continue. Humanity's survival depended not only on technology and strategy, but also on nurturing the next generation to carry forward lessons of courage, ingenuity, and compassion. The global scientific community, inspired by the success of Project Dawnfire, began to develop new technologies and strategies to prevent future invasions. Energy systems, communication networks, and defense mechanisms were improved, incorporating lessons learned from the alien attacks. International collaboration became the norm, as humanity realized that survival required unity across borders, cultures, and nations. The war had forged bonds that politics could not, and these bonds became the foundation for a stronger, more resilient civilization. The alien invasion had also changed the way humanity viewed itself. People no longer saw themselves as isolated nations or communities. They recognized that they were part of a single species, vulnerable but capable of extraordinary resilience and innovation. The destruction had revealed both fragility and strength, fear and courage, despair and hope. Humanity's response, through creativity, perseverance, and collaboration, had proven that even against forces vastly more advanced, survival was possible. In cities and towns, memorials were created for those who had been lost. Names were etched into walls, candles were lit, and stories were shared. The world remembered the sacrifices, the courage, and the determination of ordinary people who had acted heroically in extraordinary circumstances. These memorials were not just for mourning, they were symbols of hope, reminders that humanity had survived, and a testament to the enduring power of courage and cooperation. The leaders of humanity reflected on the events of the invasion. Decisions had been made under extreme pressure, often with incomplete information. Mistakes had been inevitable, but the collective response had been remarkable. Leaders worked with scientists, soldiers, and civilians to create policies that prioritized survival, cooperation, and innovation. They understood that humanity had entered a new era, one in which preparation, intelligence, and unity would define its ability to endure future challenges. Even as rebuilding continued, a sense of wonder and awe remained. Project Dawnfire had demonstrated the heights of human ingenuity. The weapon had been precise, controlled, and effective, harnessing the planet's natural forces in ways that no one had thought possible. Scientists studied the technology, refining it, understanding its principles, and imagining how it could be adapted for peaceful purposes. Humanity had created something extraordinary out of necessity, and the lessons learned would shape generations to come. Above all, the people who survived understood the value of life, community, and perseverance. Ordinary acts, sharing food, helping a neighbor, teaching a child, had become vital tools of survival. Courage had not only been found in soldiers or scientists, but in every individual who refused to give up, who acted despite fear, who continued to hope when despair was overwhelming. These acts, small and large, formed the foundation of humanity's recovery. The alien threat may have been diminished, but its legacy would endure. Humanity had witnessed the fragility of civilization, the vulnerability of cities and infrastructure, and the limits of technology. Yet it had also seen the extraordinary capacity of humans to endure, adapt, and innovate. Lessons were recorded, strategies were improved, and communities were strengthened. The war had revealed weaknesses, but it had also revealed immense strengths: creativity, cooperation, resilience, and courage. As months passed, the Earth slowly healed. Cities were rebuilt, communities strengthened, and life returned to a new normal. People learned to appreciate the small joys of life: a safe meal, the laughter of children, the warmth of companionship. The scars of destruction remained, but they served as reminders of humanity's ability to survive, to adapt, and to thrive in the face of unimaginable challenges. The story of humanity's survival spread across the globe, inspiring generations. It was a tale of courage, ingenuity, and determination. Ordinary people had become heroes. Scientists and engineers had turned imagination into reality. Soldiers had sacrificed without hesitation. Communities had endured against overwhelming odds. Humanity had faced extinction, but had responded with intelligence, bravery, and unity. In the quiet moments, people looked at the night sky and remembered the terror of the invasion. Yet they also felt pride. The world had been tested and humanity had emerged alive, stronger and wiser. The events had reshaped society, strengthened bonds, and inspired innovation. Humanity had learned that survival required more than weapons. It required courage, creativity, and collaboration. The planet itself had become a part of its defense, and humans had shown that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope and determination could prevail. Ultimately, humanity endured because it refused to give up. The alien attacks had brought destruction, fear, and despair, but they had also revealed the extraordinary potential of hope.